So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope everything's good wherever you guys are. Guys, smash the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button, share the video as always, guys. So guys, we've got a big fight this weekend. Andy Ruiz takes on Luis Ortiz, and I wanted to give my prediction video for this particular fight, and what I think happens and who I think wins. Guys, it's a brilliant fight. A brilliant fight, and I think a fight that was probably needed. I think the loser will probably go on into obscurity. I think the loser, I don't know, he'll have anywhere to go. The winner will obviously probably get another shot at the big time. Andy Ruiz, former world champion. As we know, he beat Anthony Joshua in what at the time was a shock. Andy Ruiz came in as a replacement for Gerald Miller. Luis Ortiz, for me, great fighter. I think he's obviously pretty, not beaten anyone of note. He's had some good fights, especially the first fight with Wilder, and he, was schooling Wilder the second time and got put out. But I do think Luis Ortiz is probably a fighter who we didn't really find out how good he was. He reminds me a little bit of Kell Brook, where, fought nobodies for majority of his career, and we never really got to find out how good they were. Ortiz obviously had looked the part, just like Brook did. Brook looked the part as well, but unfortunately they just didn't get any big fights. Well, Brook eventually got the big fights, but Brook he looked good, but I mean, he didn't fight the right level of opposition. And what I mean by that is that he fought the A-listers that were always going to beat him. But, he never really fought, like he fought Porter, beat Porter, solid win. But he never fought more guys like that to find out actually how good was he. The same with Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz was wiped out against Deontay Wilder. But he gave Wilder a lot of fits and potentially could have won that fight. Maybe, he ran out of gas in that fight. The second fight, I think I saw a bit... I saw his punch resistance, and I was like, Wilder hit him a few times, and I didn't like the way Luis Ortiz reacted. And then he was wiped out, later on in the fight with a right hand. And I ever since have been worried about Luis Ortiz's punch resistance. I think Luis Ortiz now has no punch resistance. I think we saw in his last fight against Martin. Martin had him all over the place. He was almost Bambi on ice. I mean, and Ortiz was somebody that I thought had a pretty good chin. And I think this comes with old age. I think Luis Ortiz is a lot older than what he's being advertised. I think he's near 50, maybe older than 50. I wouldn't be surprised. You can tell from his face, he looks really, really old. And I think as you get older, your punch resistance goes. Evander Holyfield, who had one of the best chins, we saw him come back at 60, wherever he was, and he couldn't take a punch. Because when you get older, you can't fight, man. You can't fight. Luis Ortiz is really, really old. And I think this fight 10 years ago would have been a very interesting fight. And I wouldn't have been surprised if Ortiz would have beat him, because I think Ortiz is a better technical boxer than Andy Ruiz. But Andy Ruiz has very fast hands and poor, slow feet. Now, Ortiz isn't got fleet of foot, but I think Ortiz is a better boxer. I think he's just a better boxer than Andy Ruiz. I think Andy Ruiz has got fast hands, but I think he's pretty reckless. I think he gets caught a lot, and Luis Ortiz does have power. And that's what's interesting, because in Andy Ruiz's last fight, Andy Ruiz was hurt badly against Chris Arreola, and Ortiz hits a lot harder than Chris Arreola. And what we did see in the Martin fight, that Luis Ortiz still has his power, because when he hit Martin went into another stratosphere. I mean, he hit him with a shot, and Martin didn't know where he was. He was all over the place. So obviously, Luis Ortiz still has his power. I think the difference in this fight will be that Andy Ruiz has a pretty good chin, and for me, Luis Ortiz has no punch resistance at this point. And I think it'll take if Andy Ruiz puts his punches together, I don't know whether Luis Ortiz is going to be able to absorb those shots. And I think Andy Ruiz will probably get Luis Ortiz out of there. Going off what I saw against Martin, Ruiz is a much better fighter than Martin. I can't see how Luis Ortiz is able to absorb those shots. And this age, I think Andy Ruiz is a clear favorite. Maybe 8 years ago, it might have been different. Maybe I would have had Luis Ortiz the favorite. But as of right now, I can't see Ortiz winning that fight, just because I think Ortiz is way, way past his best. I was a big admirer of Luis Ortiz, but Luis Ortiz made a lot of career. I mean, that could have been Luis Ortiz instead of Andy Ruiz against Joshua that night. Luis Ortiz got offered 7 million or something to fight Anthony Joshua, and they turned it down. Unbelievable. When you think about him fighting Wilder, where he would have got paid nowhere near the amount of money to fight Wilder as he was offered to fight Joshua, I think that was a disastrous move from his team, and I don't think it was his team. I think a lot of people give Luis Ortiz a lot of stick for that. I think Al Heyman had his fight lined up with Wilder. There was no way, and plus Luis Ortiz was precious to Heyman because they were trying to line up that Wilder fight. Andy Ruiz, the reason why they let Andy Ruiz, because Andy Ruiz in their eyes had no value at that point. They didn't hold Andy Ruiz they didn't hold him in high regard as a fighter. So that's why they were willing to let Andy Ruiz go and fight AJ. With Luis Ortiz, they had him in his plans and they viewed him as a valuable fighter. So I think it was kind of a situation where I think Luis Ortiz had no choice, in my opinion. Now, some people say Luis Ortiz's team was greedy, but I think Luis Ortiz must have been furious at that opportunity being missed, because that would have been a career payday in a fight that, who knows, that night, the way Anthony Joshua performed, Luis Ortiz might have taken Anthony Joshua out. We know Luis Ortiz has power in that left hand. And we know Joshua definitely does have issues, and he gets hit hard on the chin. So Ortiz would have had a great chance that night of beating him. And he would have made a lot of money. And he would have got a rematch against Joshua if he had beat him, which would have made him even more money. He would have been secured for life. I don't know if Ortiz... And that's why probably Ortiz is carrying on. But I personally think Ortiz is going to get stopped in this fight. Even though I'm a big admirer of Ortiz, I like Ortiz, I don't think he beats Andy Ruiz. I think Ortiz is way, way past his best. And I think Ortiz will get stopped. And that's my prediction. I think Luis Ortiz will get knocked out by Andy Ruiz. I'd love to know your opinion. Let me know what you think. Let me know who you think wins this fight. Let me know your prediction. But my prediction is that Andy Ruiz wins by a knockout. I think 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I think I would have seen the fight differently. But right now, looking at them both, looking at their current form, and looking at Luis Ortiz's, thinking about how old he actually is and the fact that his punch resistance is non-existent at this point, it's hard to see him beating a credible fighter like Andy Ruiz. If Martin is giving you that kind of trouble, I think 10 years ago, Luis Ortiz would have knocked Martin out in 2 rounds, 3 rounds. That wouldn't have been a fight. It would have been a mismatch. But the fact that the Martin fight was so competitive, and for large parts of that fight, it looked like Martin was going to beat Ortiz. I don't see how Luis Ortiz beats Andy Ruiz at this point. I think Luis Ortiz is a finished fighter. I think he's shot. And I don't think he has a chin, unfortunately, at this point to beat someone like Andy Ruiz. Even though I think technically, I think Ortiz is a better boxer than Andy Ruiz. But I just don't think he has the chin at this point. And it's sad because I think someone like Ortiz, I put him in the same category as Andrade, where he promised a lot, but unfortunately there were no big fights, and yeah, it is what it is. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.